Hello, everyone. We are live on Zoom and Facebook. Please welcome our moderator, Erica Smith of the LA Times.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Erica Smith, and I'm a columnist with the LA Times, and I'm going to be your moderator for today. This is the third community conference call produced by the United Way of Greater Los Angeles. It's Everyone in Campaign. You're going to hear today from people who are most closely involved in the response to the coronavirus pandemic as it relates to homelessness and housing. We'll also look at the most immediate emergency response and the long-term effects for LA County. Our goal is for this to flow like a panel conversation, which on Zoom is probably going to be a little bit difficult, but we're going to do our best. We've received dozens of questions in advance of today's call, so we'll try to answer some of those. If you're watching on Zoom, you can ask some questions at the Q&A box at the bottom. We'll try to get to those in real time, or if not, we will do it on social media later on. There are going to be three parts to today's conversation. The first will be an update about what's happening with efforts to protect homeless people from contracting the coronavirus. We'll also discuss what the public sector is headed in the weeks and months ahead. Second, we'll look at what can be done to create an equitable recovery across Los Angeles after the pandemic, especially as it relates to access to affordable housing. And third, we'll hear what advocates are doing to make these goals a reality. I know a number of people on this call are specifically interested in that. For each group of panelists, I'll start with a question, and then we'll move on to a group discussion. So let's get started. The first part is going to be on the public sector and its response to the pandemic. As the pandemic has unfolded, city and county and state officials have been focused on helping people who are homeless because they are among those who are most vulnerable to COVID-19. So let's get an update from some of those officials. Joining us on the call, we have Dashika Wakrema, who is the Senior Deputy for Homelessness and Mental Health for LA County Supervisor Mark Ridley Thomas. We have Christina Miller for the City of LA's Deputy Mayor of Homelessness Initiatives. And we have Teresa Chandler, who is the interim Deputy of City Manager of Long Beach and has worked to end homelessness for many years. So since they're all working in LA County, I have a question for the three of you. Can you each share a quick assessment of the local response to the pandemic in regards to homelessness? And can you each offer some insight as to what comes next? I'll let Dashika go first.
Thank you, Erica, and thank you for having me today, Tommy and team, and thank you to all the listeners for joining in today. So I'll be very brief with three main points around what we're doing right now within LA County in collaboration with other partners and what's coming next. The first point really to mention, and I know United Way and their coalition has been huge partners in this, is Measure H really laid the groundwork for the swift response to COVID-19 and how we would address homelessness. So for example, over the last 3 years since the passage of Measure H, which I think everybody knows is a sales tax, which helps fund programs and services for homeless folks, we have expanded the nonprofit network that responds on behalf of homeless folks. And we have also deepened our public sector and private sector collaboration, including with United Way and including with LA City and other cities. And this really helped us have a very swift and nimble response. So the latest update I can mention to you is just last night, we now have 34 hotels, almost 3,500 rooms, and over 3,000 homeless folks who meet the FEMA criteria of 65 years or older or underlying health conditions for COVID-19, all brought outside, away from the streets where they can be safe and protect the larger public health system as well. So this would not have been possible without a complex choreography that occurs with public sector entities, private sector entities, including nonprofits. So that's one thing I will just mention, that Measure H made that possible to have that swift response. The second thing is we have already started post-pandemic planning because we knew that this COVID-19 response is an emergency response and we needed to think about the long-term strategy. So we want to ensure that everybody we bring inside because of COVID-19 does not return back to the street. And to that end, the LA County Board of Supervisors passed 2 motions, one on April 14th and one on May 12th, looking at the post-pandemic housing plan, short, medium, and long-term plans, which look not only at how we can provide sustainable, stable housing once COVID-19 ends, but also looks to make sure that we have homeless prevention. We also have a equity responsibility, and so we do not exacerbate any disproportionality when we do COVID-19 programs or post-COVID-19 programs. The next reports are due June 12th, and all this work is being done in collaboration with United Way as well as LA City and other partners. So that's the next step that we are looking at. And the third thing related to those first two items I mentioned is the state partnership, which has been tremendous. And I know Ali is here from the state. The governor's office has really helped push us on Project Roomkey, which I know we'll talk more about. But there's also the governor's budget that's at play right now, as well as particular state legislation that will help push us forward. So one piece of law that I would like to bring to the listeners' attention is AB 3269, which is authored by Assemblymember Chu, which Supervisor Ridley Thomas, my boss, is co-sponsoring with Mayor Steinberg of Sacramento in their roles as co-chairs of the Governor's Task Force on Homelessness, which would require a statewide gaps analysis and then local plans in each jurisdiction to reduce homelessness by 90% by 2028. So more to come on that, but I would urge support on that bill as well as the local plans that I mentioned on post-pandemic long-term planning.
Got it. Thank you. Christina, do you want to fill us in a little bit about what's going on at the City of LA?
Absolutely. Thank you. And hi, everyone. And again, thanks United Way for having us here to talk about this really important issue. I think just building off of what Dakshika said, you know, the minute the coronavirus hit, the pandemic came, it brought into focus that homelessness is a public health crisis and we need to treat it as such. It also brought into extreme focus that we needed to quickly shift our resources to be focused on a life preservation mission. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the response on the ground has looked like. Basically, we, along with the county, had two primary goals when our emergency response was deployed. It was to bring people inside, and it was to bring life-saving resources to people who would remain on the streets, knowing that we wouldn't be able to shelter 60,000 people in such a short period of time countywide. So to give you a little bit of information on what the programs to bring people in have in just 7 weeks, the City of LA has opened 26 recreation centers that serve as temporary congregate settings for people who were vulnerable in the streets. We did this in partnership with Department of Public Health and under their advisement to make sure that the environments that we were setting up were safe environments for people and safer from where they were coming from. We also collectively with the county extended our winter shelter program. This is a program that typically ends mid-March, and we were able to extend it through the fall to make sure people who were temporarily sheltered in this program were not going to be discharged to the streets right in the middle of the crisis. And then finally, as Dakshika touched on, we have been entering into agreements with hotels and motels. Of the 3,500 rooms countywide that have been established, about 1,700 of those are in the City of LA, and we continue to talk to more hotel owners every day. On the street level, what's been really important in our response has been two things. One, proactive wellness checks, and two, making sure that we're proactively testing people who remain outside. To date, we have administered with our county and nonprofit partners 3,000 tests through a pop-up testing program that's been in partnership with the LA Fire Department. We've visited 30 large encampments across the city to do proactive wellness checks and to make sure that anyone who's exhibiting symptoms has access to a test or has the ability to come indoors if they choose. We've also done a lot of focus on Skid Row. Almost 2,000 of the tests that we've done citywide have been in Skid Row through our mobile pop-up testing program. And we've also focused a lot on bringing sanitation and hygiene resources to people who live in encampments. Deployed several hundred hygiene stations, hand washing stations, portable toilets, and have partnered with the YMCA to offer thousands of showers and hygiene services in their facilities while they're not being used right now as gyms. So the broader question is, where do we go from here? How do we sustain this emergency response, knowing that we are still in the midst of a crisis? I think first thing is, in partnership with the county and the state, we are committed to ensuring that people we've brought inside during this response are triaged to a safe place to live after we demobilize our emergency response. We also need to think really hard about what reopening means for people brought inside. As restaurants begin to open, as hotels begin to open, it's really important for us to make sure that we are thoughtful about how we safely exit people, not back to encampments, but to a safe alternate place to live indoors. And finally, I'll say this week, the city announced the $100 million rental assistance program. This is the largest assistance program in the country that is going to be funded with emergency federal resources to make sure that people have some relief who are most impacted by the economic crisis due to the pandemic. So, touch on some of there's much more I could say, but I know we're short on time, so I'll stop there with what the city has done so far.
Great, thank you. And then Teresa, do you want to talk about Long Beach? I know Teresa was having some connection problems, so I'm not sure if she got cut from the call or not, but we'll try to circle back to her later. But in the meantime, I'll move on to Allie Sutton with the state, who is the state's Deputy Secretary of Homelessness. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about Project Room Key, which is again that program to get the most vulnerable homeless people off the streets and into hotel rooms to kind of avoid them coming down with the coronavirus and contracting COVID. How do you think that initiative has gone so far, and from your perspective, and what do you think comes next?
Yeah, hi everyone, and also a big thanks to United Way for inviting me. I'm really pleased to be here today. You know, in terms of Project Room Key, we are thrilled. The fact that we were able to pull off something really unprecedented in the amount of time that we had to make sure that we could bring folks indoors and keep them safe and prevent hospital surge has been a really incredible state-county partnership and state-local partnership. I mean, at the state level, the number of agencies that have been providing support for this and the partnership we are seeing and the collaboration we are seeing at the state level is unprecedented. And our ability to be in very close conversations with counties, trying to triage with them and problem solve with them in live time, I think has been a really valuable partnership to be building, and a testament to the fact that we've been able to reach our 15,000 hotel room goal. So for folks, I'm a big data nerd and wanted to make sure that we were able to provide some updates on that on this call. At the state level, as of Wednesday, we had 15,685 rooms available across the state, and just under 10,000 of those, 9,244 are currently occupied. You know, I think given that's a really incredible number of folks to be bringing indoors in a really quick amount of time. Often, as the deputy mayor mentioned, you know, folks that have been coming indoors for the first time in years, and so we, you know, that effort and the need to make sure that we could keep our homeless Californians safe in this moment was really critical for us and required just partnership at every level of government and local nonprofits. So we're really pleased and think it is and continues to be a success. We're not over with it yet, and we continue to ensure that those rooms continue to be occupied. And I think our next step is in terms of where we're eager to continue that partnership and work with local communities is to ensure that folks are exiting into permanent housing. That has been something the governor has mentioned very clearly. It is something that, you know, as the Homeless Coordinating and Financing Council at the state level, we are already starting to focus on and think about how to use the resources we have at our disposal to be helping communities think about how to make sure that these folks that have been kept safe during the pandemic are also able to be moved into permanent housing. So, you know, I think in some of that, the ways that we're trying to do some of those pieces, Dakshika mentioned the governor's May revised budget. We've taken 600 million, are proposing 600 million of the state's coronavirus relief fund money that was given to the state to put directly into motel acquisition to try to turn as many of these rooms into permanent housing solutions for for folks that are in Project Room Key right now. It's it'll be a very significant lift. It's something that we, really could not be doing without the partnership we've built over the last few months with our local community members. And so are looking forward to trying to figure out how to do that in partnership with local communities as a piece of the puzzle. We know that that is not the only part of this that the homeless system is going to need help recovering in, but it is certainly something we want to make sure we do right, and we make sure that folks are not exiting back into unsheltered situations.
Got it. And I think Teresa is back on the call. And if so, can you talk a little bit about what's going on in Long Beach? Teresa, I think you're still muted. Oh, I think she might be gone again. We'll have to circle back. But Allie, since I have you, I wanted to ask you a question about just the federal government. And you've talked a little bit about the governor's May revised budget and some of the funding challenges in general. What do you think the most helpful thing the federal government could be doing right now to help in this crisis? And it could be any agency within the Trump administration, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd start out with, and I probably should have mentioned this in how the state has been working on this thus far. The partnership with our HUD, the Office of Special Needs Assistance Programming, has been really strong throughout. I think that the resources they've been putting out to local providers and continuums of care has been very much live time as we are all learning. Trying to get that information out to communities as quickly as possible, and at the state level have been really welcoming of coordinating with us and helping understand where we need more flexibility given the situation we're in. So I would start by saying, I think on the SNAPS team, at least at HUD, we've had some really great partnership already. It is no surprise. I mean, the governor made it very clear in his press conference around the May revised budget that the HEROES Act that is currently with the Senate, it passed the House a couple of weeks ago, but that is with the Senate right now, is critical to ensuring that the state does not have to make some really, really significant budget cuts. And in terms of homelessness specifically, there are a couple pieces in that legislation that would be unprecedented and in the amount of funding that it would provide to our state and our communities. I mean, it's over $100 billion of assistance that would be able to help homeowners, renters, and those experiencing homelessness, with $11.5 billion of that going directly for the Emergency Solutions Grant for homeless assistance. So that kind of funding, we are really advocating and doing our very best to try to see come to fruition. We understand the impact that would have at the state level, and so I think that's something that we are eagerly awaiting action on, and I think would be a really critical piece to our recovery process.
Got it. To the panelists, all three of you that are here, can you talk a little bit about how the cities and counties in the state are working together to achieve some of these goals? I think all of you kind of hinted at that or tiptoed around that in your comments, but I mean, is it kind of a hand in glove partnership as the governor would say, or is it a little bit disjointed at times? I don't know who wants to start. Christina, Dashika.
I mean, I can start, and then maybe just on, there are so many different pieces, and I think I kind of said it's like a complex ballet almost. So the state tells us what hotels are interested. The LA County CEO Real Estate Division then reaches out to hotel owners and figures out the 90-day occupancy agreements. It's a 90-day occupancy agreement. And LA City, in the LA City portion, does the same around the lease costs. But then the more complex kind of scenarios around the staffing. So we have an entity, a joint powers LA County, LA City entity called LASA. And they then work with service providers who experience. They have a request for information on their website. Service providers provide oversight at a hotel depending on which region the hotel is. And then below that, you have LA County mental health workers, LA County nurses. We also have LA City and LA County disaster service worker volunteers providing non-clinical kind of services. The hotel is able to hire back hotel workers for laundry and those kinds of concierge service. We used to have LA Fire Department doing logistics, but they are now transitioning out because fire season is starting. We have to think about transportation. There are meals provided 3 times a day. So that happens for every hotel. And Christine, I don't know if you can add more, but that is happening, and each hotel is being activated in 3 to 5 days on average. And we just hit the milestone yesterday, which is 34 hotels, 3,500 rooms open. And of those, over 3,000 are in them. So LA County's percentage is a little higher than what Ali mentioned statewide, but it's a complex choreography that occurs.
Yeah, and I can just build off that. It's a monumental lift in the county to get these hotels online. I'll also say, just more broadly speaking, there's really critical coalitions across the state. The mayor is part of something called the Big City Mayors, which is part of 13 other large cities across the state, and they're just constantly talking, figuring out all of this new environment together, right? Because everything we're doing is unprecedented. The fact that FEMA is reimbursed for aggregate settings to prevent people from becoming sick in a crisis is unprecedented. So there's so much learning and there's so much peer-to-peer support happening. We've heard that San Diego, for example, has started acquiring hotels. And so now we're talking to our contacts in San Diego to say, how are you doing that?
I think you're breaking up a little bit, Christina.
And has been really critical since we are in uncharted.
Okay. Well, thank you. And I'm going to let Ali weigh in really quickly. We have to move on to our next panel. So if you have a couple of words you wanted to say in closing, Ali.
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned it at the starts of my comments. I mean, I think at the state level, the agency partnership, and then the amount of close contact our teams are in with the local communities and COCs, I think it's really unprecedented. And we are systems that really like to be siloed, and I think it has taken this sort of crisis to really break down a lot of that and get the work done that needs to get done. So I've been really pleased with it.
Okay. Well, it looks like we do have room for one more question. One question I had too is about the acquisition of the hotels under Project Roomkey, and moving forward. I think a number of you talked about using the hotels that are already there or moving people into other hotels. Have there been problems purchasing hotels, or is that some of the challenges in doing that, or have you run into other challenges that are worth considering? And I can ask Ali that as in addition to Christina.
Yeah, I mean, at the state level thus far, that $600 million that we are proposing is still just a proposal. So I would say that we're not yet at the expected challenges we know will come, but are in preparation for that, and are working with communities right now about some of the conversations they've had either with Project Roomkey hotels or with other hotels or motels that have shown interest, and trying to understand how to do that quickly and how to sort of acquire quickly given the funding needing to be spent by the end of the calendar year. So I think we're preparing for challenges we know to come, but we yet at the state have not been engaged in those conversations since the funding right now is just a proposal.
Got it. And it looks like Teresa's back, so I wanted to give her a chance to comment on what's going on in Long Beach and just kind of where they are as far as with project, as far as getting people off the streets.
Sure, thank you. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so I just, I want to thank you and United Way for the invitation to speak today, and I apologize for my connection issues. So Long Beach is it's a big little city in the county, within the county, and we are fortunate enough to have our own health department. So we've been able to mobilize very quickly across our departments, across the city, and in partnership with the county and the state. And so just real quickly, we mobilized our emergency operations center and set up within that center. I was moved from the city manager's office and relocated into the emergency operations to then work on our operations with the team, that's everyone that is located there. And so, we were able to activate pop-up shelters in partnership with our parks. And also, moving into the Project Roomkey, working with the state and county partners, locating different motels that were willing and wanting to participate. And so we do have ongoing negotiations with motels here. Our outreach teams have been incredible, really reaching out to folks that are willing to come into shelters, congregate and Project Roomkey, and then those that are not willing, and really trying to keep people connected, because Long Beach has our own continuum of care and our coordinated entry process. And so we are getting everybody screened through our wellness system, getting wellness checks through the system. The Children's Clinic is actually our community partner who's doing all of the wellness screenings before folks are going into the shelter system. So we do have a good system, but we're a smaller, tighter knit, but there are folks that are coming from across the county. So we are an ongoing partnership and conversations. We extended our winter shelter here in we have the Spot 8 location here. So working with LASA to do that. And then one thing that's really important that I wanted to touch on about Long Beach is that we do have an Office of Equity. And so they were actually embedded into our Emergency Operations Center, which is really key in how we push everything forward in all of our sheltering and all of our testing sites, that we're making sure we use our equity toolkit and it's embedded in all the conversations and objectives that we're pushing out. So, you know, as a smaller jurisdiction, we can have those conversations and we can move those questions, using the toolkit, we can move those within the departments and with our community partners. And as far as next steps, we are looking at long-term, obviously, you know, expand. We have a year-round bridge housing project coming online. We're looking at, you know, motel owners that are willing to sell or wanting to potentially move into SSOs or permanent housing type projects. And so we have those ongoing conversations. So I know we don't have a lot of time and I did have more to share, but I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to, you know, bring Long Beach into the conversation as well.
Well, thank you. I'm glad we managed to connect. So I want to thank the panelists in the first part of this program. The second, we're going to move on to the second section. We're going to be talking about creating an equitable economy in Los Angeles. With the unemployment near 20% and a recent McKinsey report showing that 40% of jobs in our region are in jeopardy, LA, by most accounts, is facing a steep downturn. Hundreds of thousands of people could be at risk for homelessness. And while this is bleak, many have said it's also presented an opportunity to make changes that address systemic inequities that have existed long before the pandemic. Joining us for this discussion is Dan Langford, who's from the Southwest Regional Council of Carpenters. We have Reverend Ray Chin Wong from LA Voice. And we have Michael Kelly from the LA Coalition for the Economy and Jobs. I'm going to start with Reverend Ray. Can you talk a little bit about what your focus is at LA Voice moving forward, given the pandemic? And what do you see is needed in terms of policy change and resources to address what's coming?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks to everyone Tommy and Erica, for guiding this conversation and having it. So at LA Voice, we are a multiracial, multi-faith, member-based organization. And we're also part of a national network. And so we actually did a local, statewide, and national listening campaign at the very beginning of our pandemic to understand what the interests and concerns of our communities were across the nation, and particularly for us here locally. And what we found was we decided to call it a mnemonic, that what we needed and what we needed to pursue, and the focus for us is on relief, the 3 R's, relief, recovery, and renewal. Relief for what we need in this moment to survive. A lot of our community members are really struggling with food insecurity, with being able to stay in their homes in this moment and responding to that. The second is recovery. What do we need in the future to thrive? We saw it back in the economic crisis in 2008, that those who suffered the most were those from our most vulnerable communities, especially our Black and Brown communities. And so what do we need to ensure that we are actually setting the stage for that we can thrive in the future, even after this pandemic is over? And especially renewal. What was not working before, and what do we need to change so that we're actually stronger at the end of this season than we were before it. We know, for example, that the pandemic we're experiencing now is not the only pandemic that we're suffering through, but in light of the unjust death of George Floyd, for example, we have another pandemic, which is the pandemic of systemic racism. And so we need to be able to acknowledge those things and begin to uncover and break down those systems and begin to change the systems we need so that we can actually have proper renewal for all of our communities, that everybody can thrive at the end of this. For us in particular, we've been focusing in for these next few weeks on the budget. We know that we are in a budget crisis at the state level with a $54 billion deficit. And right now the cuts are going to be on schools and youth and families. We, again, do not want to see what happened in 2008. So we are saying, what we need now is funding that that's going to go towards the resources of schools, to families, to youth, to our communities. The other area too is the budget crisis, budget decisions in the city right now, to make sure and ensure that our money is not going to go towards policing, but our money is going to go to our communities and what we need in this moment for our families. A lot of our folks like to say a lot of great things, but we need to put our money where our mouth is. And so, and that's what we're calling upon our communities, our state legislators and our city legislators to do in this moment. To answer what we need in terms of policy and resources, I'm going to use another mnemonic just to help us remember it. And that is the 3 Ps: protections, production, and preservation. So when we talk about and think about protections for our unhoused, we are thinking about providing resources such as hand washing stations, cleaning stations. We're talking about services, not sweeps. We want to ensure that our unhoused communities are able to keep their possessions they have in this moment, that's keeping them safe, that's keeping their livelihood together with them instead of taking it away. Other things that we need as well in terms of policy is rent and mortgage forgiveness. Even if we provide relief in this moment, in a few weeks, in a few months, they're going to have to start thinking about paying back their rent that they owed from before. There's no way, if you don't have a job now, you're not going to make up 2 or 3 times the amount of money that you lost over the last couple of months. So we need to be thinking about rent and mortgage forgiveness now and be thinking about how we can ensure that our communities are going to thrive at the end of this. The other area in terms of policy is making sure that our communities are going to get legal resources and support. So as they are fighting their eviction process, that they actually have that support that they need. The second P is production. I'm moving quickly here. I know that we're short on time. The second P is production. And I like to be thinking, by the way, about protections with relief, production with recovery. And so we know that the solution to ending homelessness is housing. This means not more luxury housing, but supportive, affordable housing in all parts of our county. So that means that we are actually placing housing in every single aspect of our cities. And we've already voted that we want more housing. We already voted that we want to protect and provide housing for our most vulnerable. And yet we're still fighting the fight in every city to be able to have it there. And so that's an area that we are also working on and is important to us. We know that health for you means health for me, and health for me means health for you. And so that means that we have to lift everybody up. And that means housing for everybody. That means food for everybody. So making sure that we don't have food deserts. That means good schools for everybody. So all of this stuff goes hand in hand. And then the third R is renewal, the third P is preservation. Not only do we need to preserve the few affordable housing units we currently have, but we need to be thinking long-term about how to preserve the housing that we are producing now. What resources and legislation can support the acquisition, for example, of distressed land by communities and families through things like land trusts or nonprofits, so that the land is preserved for the use of our communities and neighborhoods for years to come? How can we ensure that our land is going to be staying within our communities and not be used for profit, to be sure that our housing is going to be, that housing really is a part of the health project for the communities of Los Angeles. So yeah, I hope I was able to answer some of your questions there.
Sorry, I muted myself. Thank you, Gray. To build on that, Dan, I wanted to talk a little bit about housing. What do you think the recovery needs to look like for working in low-income folks in LA County, and particularly when it comes to securing affordable housing or housing they can afford?
Thank you, Erica, and thanks United Way for the invitation to participate today. So for me, I think you have to refine what affordable housing means. So let's look at housing first. Right now, the traditional model is not working. I think we have to look at other ways where we could get people off the street and into affordable housing. I had the opportunity to work with the City of Los Angeles and with some private entrepreneurs, and we partnered and went on a project called Urban Awnings. And these are small units. And the first intent was for those that are experiencing homelessness. And they're great units. They're self-contained. They have a restroom and a kitchen, and they can be configured where they can even house a family of 4. But as we looked at it, we saw other ways that it could be utilized. It could be used for student housing. It could be used for workforce housing. And the thing is that it can go to market quicker, cheaper, and actually per capita for an acre of land, you could put 160 people in beds in an acre of land. So for me, I think you have to redefine what housing means, not the traditional brick and mortar housing that we all know. The second part, I think, and is more important, is what is affordable? I mean, I think we have to redefine affordable. 2 people working full-time, minimum wage jobs, even if a developer has discounted units, they can't afford to live there. It's not affordable to them. And to me, this hits home because I'm one generation away from where a single income family could afford a home, could afford a car, could go on family vacations, and could put money away in a college fund for their children. You know, that's long gone. That's something of the past. And for me, for a country that operates on the principles of capitalism, this pandemic has showed more than ever that if you bypass the workforce and you devalue labor, the economy falls apart immediately when we have a hiccup like we've had right now. So I think that those that build that housing have to have more than a livable wage. They have to be able to afford the housing that they're building. It has to have health care as part of that. So those that are working don't have to decide between paying the rent or going to the doctor or paying for the prescription or buying groceries. So it just goes down to what we call community wealth. Those that create the wealth should be able to share in it. So for me, not just in construction, I think that we have to really look at valuing labor so people can live and work in the same community. That could generate people opening businesses in that community. And when people are paid well and can pay their bills, and they also have some expendable income, that puts the economy on overdrive. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I wanted to mention was I don't think affordable housing is just rental housing. I know that most people that I know that have built any personal wealth at all, it's through equity in their property. So I think we should also come up with ways where these properties have some type of equity built in for the people that move in so they can build that personal wealth. And I think that's the only way that you really change the system and bring people out of poverty and get them into the system and make our city work. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. That helps. So building on that, Michael, what do you see as the role of the business community in supporting a recovery? And that leads to a stronger, more equitable LA County. And of those, what do you think is the most important thing to tackle kind of first?
Well, I think that going back to the tackling, talking about everybody's kind of getting into is, there's the 2 issues on this, right? Is making sure that we can open the economy and make everybody feel safe, not just the businesses opening up for the sake of economic growth and people being employed, but making them feel safe, but making sure that people feel safe going in and frequent these businesses. But I think, a lot of people tend to forget that the business community is really as diverse as our population. And so if you want to look at it, I think there's some great stories that have come from this tragedy of this crisis is, some of the bigger employers have stepped up and they've retained workers. I've seen other folks, even if they had to furlough people, they made sure that they maintained their healthcare benefits. I've seen a lot of money being donated, a lot of volunteer hours, laptops and PPE and food and everything else being donated. Then you have kind of the split. There's some, smaller businesses within the community that are thriving. Some places, making sure that people have the essentials, whether it's, food and the toilet paper and all that other kind of stuff are thriving. Then you have some of the manufacturers and local apparel companies that have recalibrated their operations to make sure that people have the, protective equipment, whether the masks and, or you got, Cal State Dominguez Hills that has a great, STEM program and Fab Labs that have 3D and additive manufacturing are making shields for local healthcare providers. So I think there's a lot of amazing stories that have really popped up within this, but I think that there's a part of the business community that people tend to overlook, because what we usually see is the anchor tenants, right? We see the big Hollywood studios, we see the density of the tech jobs on the west side and some other spots, and then you see the other kind of the big healthcare providers of a Kaiser or Cedars and all that. But at the end of the day, 93% of the businesses in LA County employ less than 20 employees. 2.3 million employees are employed by business that has under 100 people. So that's the backbone. If you think about the workforce of LA County, it was pre-crisis getting up to about 5.5 million people were working, which is a good thing. And if you noticed in the stats and the data I just gave you, I mean, half those people are working in these small businesses. So, I mean, the question now becomes of not only just a path forward for how do we reopen our economy, but how do we actually too go back into kind of the other points being made of how do we recalibrate LA's economy moving forward. And one of the things is, the public sector is playing a much bigger role than it ever has. Of our national GDP, the overall public spend, federal, state, and local, is about 34% of our GDP now. Here at the local level, it's about 11%. And, and what's happening is, as the role of government grows, particularly with this crisis, what we're dealing with is there's going to be less and less money for government to provide all the services and the programs and all the other things that historically it has done. So I think this is a critical time in which the private sector and the business community really needs to work more in lockstep with government. And government has to too be a little more effective and understand that, not everything can be solved with money. There's a lot of different policies that can be changed, particularly I think we know the path forward on affordable housing. I think we just need to figure out how to up the production of more affordable housing and figure out how to do that in a way where it's going to require less of a public subsidy. Then we have to, I always harp on these three critical points of our economy that people overlook too, is the three most critical parts to an equitable economy are housing, education, and healthcare. That's always been historically three major points. And I think, unfortunately, those are three things that basically have far outgrown any wage increases anybody's ever had in this last decade. Mm-hmm. So unless we're able to have the federal, state, and local in any role they can play, making sure that we have more affordable housing, more affordable education, or getting people the skills to get some of these jobs that are paying the higher wages, and figure out how to get like I said, healthcare that's more affordable and more portable and more accessible. And I think there's a lot of ways that we can do it. And when it comes to the business community in the private sector, I think we just have to figure out how do we create not just more jobs, but better paying jobs that provide not just a better income, but more training programs and other opportunities, and make sure that we have more policies in place to build on some of the things that have changed. We should make sure that people can, not worry about being homeless, not worry about feeding themselves, not worry about taking care of their kids in daycare, and they can't take 2 weeks off from work. They can't take a sick day off from work. So I think there's so many things that can be tackled, but I'd like to think that we've had a good positive response, not just from the government end, but from the private sector. But there's a lot more to be done.
Got it. And we only have like literally 2 minutes left in this segment, but do you think that there's any way to kind of work together on some of these goals that you've mentioned? I don't know if one of you wants to tackle that one quickly.
I think there's a lot of great things that are already going on. There's a lot of public-private partnerships. Referencing Dan's point on affordable housing, I think there's a lot of things that are happening at the local level. Hopefully, I think when it comes back to reopening the economy, it's going to take going back into not just government saying you can reopen, but making sure the private sector is going to make people feel comfortable. I think hopefully at some point soon we're going to hear what I think Long Beach has done a great job of you close down some of the streets, you work with the local retailers and restaurants and all that stuff, and set up everything in a way where people will start walking to their local main street and sit down and have a meal and be able to see other people at a physical distance that's safe.
Got it. We have time probably for one more person to weigh in.
So for me, every economic downturn this country has ever faced, one of the indicators that we're coming out of that downturn is construction activity. So, hey, we're willing to build our way out of this crisis, and for us, our commitment is that we're going into communities that have been underserved and recruiting people that maybe haven't had an opportunity, finding them employment, putting them into our training programs, giving them just not a job opportunity, but putting them on a career path. So I think it's important that construction continues in the housing, affordable housing, schools, transportation is huge. So I think that's important that we do as we always have. We build our way out of a hole to make this country better and put us back on the economic path.
Great. Okay, Ray, did you want to add a couple things? Just got 30 seconds to close out this segment.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, what we do best at LA Voice is we work with faith communities, and that is folks who are across the board working in private and public sectors, and we work together. And that's the only way that we can really accomplish this, is by being able to hear each other out and be able to be innovative and collaborative in our spaces. So yeah, in this moment, I mean, the only way that we're going to be able to win and recover is by working collaboratively and unifying the strength that we have and doing it together. So we rise up together. That's our theme, and that's how we'll do it.
Great. Well, thank you for those comments. I appreciate that. We're going to move on to our third segment, which is about questions and next steps. As I mentioned at the beginning of the call, we received a large number of questions in advance. We tried to answer as many as possible along the way on social media, but we have a couple more that we wanted to try to address right now, and then we'll close it out with some next steps. So for this final part of the day's conversation, I'm going to welcome Rudy Espinoza, who's the Executive Director of the Inclusive Action for the City of LA, and Tommy Newman, who's a Senior Director of Impact Initiatives with the United Way of Greater Los Angeles. So the first question is going to be for Tommy. Luke in West Hollywood asks, in terms of activism, what should our top priority be? And what about 3 months from now?
I just want to start by thanking everybody who's been listening. I know we have a few hundred here on the Zoom, and then many more on Facebook as well. So thank you for taking an hour out of your day to think about these challenges and to figure out how you can help. It means a lot. And thank you to everybody who's participated. We're going to try to take a lot of the themes and messages here and carry them forward. Luke asks a very hard question because there is so much to do right now. And whether it's to the point that Ray raised, the structural and systemic racism that we're seeing flare up, but is not new in Minneapolis and across the country, that's incredibly important. We're seeing some really important advocacy in DC right now around the next federal package, which we really need to make sure has what it takes to support the people who need it the most. We're seeing housing bills in Sacramento that deserve our attention and focus to make sure that they produce the affordable housing that we need. And we're seeing local efforts as well, not only to make sure that we come up with a plan, and the county's doing some great work on this, to create a path to housing for all 15,000 people who are most vulnerable to this virus. That's critically important, but also so much more. So it's not an easy answer. I would say that the best way to advocate is to speak to what you're most passionate about. So of that whole menu of things that I just listed, there are a lot of really great organizations that are focusing on different components of those challenges. One of the core focuses that we have right now on the Everyone In campaign is really working with the county, the cities across the county, and the state to put together the resources we need so that there is a path to housing, to permanent housing for every single person who is vulnerable to this virus. That's our core focus. And so we actually have a tweet opportunity set up, which if Frank takes us to the next slide, you'll be able to see. You can visit everyoneInLA.org/safe-homes-now, and we'll put that in the chat box as well. And share a tweet that appreciates the LA County Board of Supervisors for getting the ball rolling on coming up with this planning process, because let's be clear, Project Dream Key, critically important, as you heard Dakshika describe it, emergency response. But now we need to be thinking about what comes after that emergency response. And we have some federal funds that could be used to help make this plan a reality. But it's going to take all of us advocating that those federal funds are used in this way. Because there's a lot of need out there, and we get that. So, Luke, I would say if that strikes you as something that fires you up, start by doing that tweet. If you're not an active Twitter user, you should sign up for Everyone In, and we'll figure out other ways to help plug you in. Our organizers are doing that work all the time. But I would say whatever it is, the Healthy LA Coalition is doing some really great work, and we're proud to be a part of that group. You can check out their website there. Or if advocacy is, not necessarily your thing, or you're still sort of finding your way, we have a really cool set of materials on our website now called our Advocacy Base Camp, which will sort of help introduce you to what it means to be an advocate digitally. You don't have to leave your apartment in West Hollywood or home, whatever you're living in West Hollywood. And you can check out and start to sort of develop that language, that muscle, and join us in this work. So lots to do, lots going on right now, but we need your help.
Great, thank you for that, Tom. The next question is going to be for Rudy, and this one's from Brittany in Alhambra, who asks, where are recovery efforts being focused, and who is being excluded or getting a smaller share of the relief?
That's a great question, Brittany, and thanks for having me, Erica, and everybody here on the team. Recovery efforts are, trying to impact various elements of our society. There's a lot of recovery efforts focused on small businesses, helping to get capital and support to them so they could keep and maintain jobs. There's a lot of, as you heard today on the call, a lot of folks that are working on making sure that that folks can stay housed, or those that are unhoused, they could find shelter during this time. There's a variety of different mutual aid initiatives that are taking place, including one that my organization is involved with called the Street Vendor Emergency Fund, is trying to get resources to undocumented street vendors in Los Angeles. There's a lot. But the question of exclusion is an important one, because I think in all the task forces that are being created at the city, at the county, and even at the state level, you may find that one important voice might be missing, and that's the voice of Black and Brown people, especially immigrants during this time. And just a few hours ago, the LA Times put out another article talking about how COVID-19 is impacting Black and Brown people during this time. And we're seeing that, white people are less likely to die from COVID-19. Black people are dying at double the rate of white folks, and Latinos are dying at 70% of the rate. And so now, this is not something that's new to folks, and this is the reason why there's an uprising happening in Minneapolis and many other cities. This is signaling to us that the place that we were before COVID-19 is a place of many broken systems that excludes Black and Brown people, especially low-income communities. And so this is an opportunity now, as Reverend Ray and others have spoken about, is what are we going to do differently to not come back to normal? We can't go back to what normal was. We have to create a new normal that is just.
Got it. Great. Thank you for that. So we're going to close it out now and ask for some final thoughts from Rudy and Tommy. Rudy, what are your priorities right now? And what do you see is the best way for people to kind of get involved and help chart the way forward? I think you got into some of that in your last answer, but I think there's probably some more information you could provide for folks.
Yeah, I mean, well, my organization does a lot of economic development work to support small businesses. We believe that small businesses are a critical part of our communities. We do a lot of work with street vendors. There's 50,000 micro entrepreneurs that vend on the sidewalk, and many of them are excluded during this time. This is one of those groups that's being excluded. So what we're doing is we're providing a lot of assistance to each of these businesses to help them get support so they could stay sheltered and they get food on their table. Our emergency fund is getting direct cash assistance to them, and we need people to contribute. And so we, of course, are asking for donations, and there's various, again, mutual aid groups that are trying to put together resources. The United Way has a pandemic relief fund that invested into the street vendor emergency fund. So giving is important. But the second thing, Erica, that I want to just share that's super important is when you give and you volunteer, you have to also do something extra for us. And that is picking up the phone, getting on a Zoom call, and getting involved and talking to your elected officials. And I invite people to be part of the Healthy LA group that Reverend Ray and Tommy mentioned. There's a lot of people that are working hard to change the systems that have caused this mess and have caused this pandemic and have accelerated this pandemic. We need people those elected officials need to hear from us. They need to hear our priorities. And so one key thing that we're asking for people is to get involved and find an organization that's doing advocacy work, and let's make some change happen.
Got it. And Tommy, for you, how's the United Way moving forward, and how can people plug in to help with these efforts?
Well, I appreciate it. And thanks again to everybody. If you haven't already signed up for Everyone In campaign, please do that. Go to everyoneinla.org. And if you enter a zip code of where you live, we'll sort of help curate the opportunities that we send you based on your zip. So if you're in the San Gabriel Valley, we'll send you stuff that's relevant to the SGV, and we'll try to avoid sending you things about the fights in Venice and vice versa. So sign up if you haven't already. On the screen, you can see the Pandemic Relief Fund is still growing strong. We've been able to raise a lot of money and support a lot of great organizations, and we want to keep doing that. Healthy LA is a great partner of ours. And then, yeah, I do want to focus on the fact that the county has gotten the ball rolling with a really comprehensive vision for what it takes to create a path to housing for 15,000 people. I know the city's talking about it too, and we'll start having that conversation more with the city of LA and in Long Beach, where we have Jordan, our dedicated organizer of the city of Long Beach. These same conversations are happening. So we need to really help support these conversations, support our elected leaders who see this vision, who believe in creating a path to housing for the people who are most vulnerable to this virus. And so we invite you to join our campaign, help us support our elected leaders who are willing to take on this challenge and drive this forward, because this is an opportunity to really help a lot of people, and we need your help to do it.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you everybody for being with us this afternoon. We're gonna wrap up now. I hope it's been helpful and informative. And if you've RSVP'd through the everyonein.la.org site, they'll be following up with resources in an email, and they may plan to do another call like this in the future. So until then, be well, take care.